July 17, 2025. It was a Thursday morning like any other in Omaha, Nebraska. Humid skies, buzzing airports, people rushing through TSA checkpoints, business travelers sipping airport coffee, and families headed out for vacation. Delta Connection Flight 3612, operated by SkyWest Airlines, was scheduled to depart Omaha's Eppley Airfield just after 9 a.m., bound for Detroit Metropolitan Airport in Michigan. A short flight. Just under 2 hours. The aircraft? A Bombardier CRJ-900, a regional jet known for its efficiency and comfort. Capacity, 76 passengers. The day's manifest listed 67 souls on board, including pilots, flight attendants, and one man who would soon make headlines across the country. Mario Nikprelaj, a 23-year-old from Nebraska. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video for more shocking secrets, undercover missions, and high-level twists. Help us keep revealing the untold stories that others dare not tell. At first glance, Mario was just another traveler. A young man in casual attire. Flying alone. Not drawing attention. But by the time the aircraft reached cruising altitude, his presence would turn the flight from routine to terrifying. Inside the cabin, it was business as usual. The flight attendants made their announcements, passengers buckled in, and the hum of the engines became white noise. Some passengers opened laptops, others closed their eyes. A woman near the front ordered ginger ale and opened a book. 2 kids in row 14 were watching a cartoon on an iPad. And then there was Mario, seated about halfway down the aircraft. According to later passenger interviews, he hadn't seemed particularly unusual, maybe a little quiet, a bit anxious. But that could describe half the plane. No one knew that something inside him, whether a snap in logic, a building fear, or a far darker intent, was starting to bubble up. Flight 3612 took off without delay, ascending smoothly into the summer sky. The captain made a brief announcement from the cockpit. Cruising altitude, 34,000 feet. Estimated arrival in Detroit, 12:01 p.m. Eastern. It was somewhere over Iowa, around 40 minutes into the flight, when the situation began to shift. Witnesses described a noticeable change in Mario's behavior. He got up from his seat, not unusual on a flight, but the way he moved caught some attention. According to a woman seated near the aisle, he wasn't walking to the bathroom. He looked confused, like he didn't know where he was. What happened next unraveled in seconds. Mario reportedly turned toward the aircraft's midsection exit, specifically the right-hand emergency door, located behind the wing. He reached for the handle. Not casually, not hesitantly. He gripped it like he meant to pull it. Passengers nearby froze. Someone screamed. A flight attendant rushed forward, shouting for him to stop. Another passenger leaped from his seat to restrain him. There was chaos. Someone shouted, "He's trying to open the door." In reality, it's impossible to open a plane's door mid-flight due to cabin pressure. The force keeping it sealed is equivalent to hundreds of pounds per square inch. But that didn't make the attempt any less terrifying, or any less illegal. Mario was now being physically restrained by multiple passengers and a flight attendant. His face was red. He was sweating. He didn't resist violently, not at first. But he also didn't seem fully aware of what was happening. The flight crew acted quickly and professionally. The pilot was notified instantly. Within moments, they made the decision. An emergency landing would be necessary. The closest viable airport? Cedar Rapids, Iowa. As the plane began to descend, fear rippled through the cabin. What had just happened? Was this a hijack attempt? Was Mario armed? Mentally unstable? Under the influence? The flight crew didn't take any chances. Protocols were activated. Law enforcement on the ground was contacted. The flight, now redirected, was given emergency clearance to land at the Eastern Iowa Airport in Cedar Rapids. According to flight tracking data, Delta Flight 3612 had been airborne for just over 53 minutes when it touched down on runway 9. On the tarmac, police and federal agents were already waiting. As the aircraft taxied to a secure area, the flight attendants calmly instructed passengers to remain seated. Then authorities boarded the plane. Mario Nikprelaj was escorted off in handcuffs. He did not resist. Within hours, the story hit headlines across the country. Passenger attempts to open emergency exit door mid-flight on Delta plane. Arrest made in Iowa emergency landing. Major news outlets, from CNN and CBS to People.com, began reporting what little was known. A young man 23 years old. A commercial flight disrupted. Dozens of lives potentially at risk. Federal charges likely pending. SkyWest Airlines issued a formal statement, commending the crew and passengers for their quick response and confirming that the emergency door had never been opened or compromised. The plane was inspected and later cleared for continued operations. But for the 67 people on board Flight 3612, that Thursday morning became a lasting memory. A reminder that fear doesn't need a weapon to spread. It just needs a moment and the wrong person. While most passengers continued their journey on alternate flights later that day, the investigation into why Mario Nikprelaj acted the way he did was only just beginning. Was this a mental health crisis? An act of sabotage? Drug-induced paranoia? Or something deeper, darker, and more deliberate? When a young man tries to open the emergency exit door mid-flight, one question echoes louder than the rest. Who is he, and why did he do it? The name Mario Nikprelaj meant nothing to the public on the morning of July 17, 2025. But by midday that name was flashing across news tickers and making its way into FBI briefings. This wasn't just another unruly passenger. This was a federal crime at 34,000 feet. So who is Mario Nikprelaj, the 23-year-old whose outburst caused an emergency landing and put dozens of lives at risk? Let's pull back the curtain. Mario Nikprelaj was a resident of Nebraska, believed to be living in or near the Omaha area. Public records show a limited digital footprint. No criminal history. No violent run-ins with the law. Just a young man, legally an adult, but still figuring out life. He had a modest background, working-class roots, immigrant heritage. Several sources suggest that his family had ties to the Albanian-American community, a tight-knit diaspora known for its resilience and cultural pride. But there's little public evidence of whether he was particularly involved in it. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and kept to himself. A few said he seemed a bit distant, but never caused trouble. He wasn't the type you'd expect to see on national news, let alone in handcuffs on a commercial runway. But Mario's recent behavior told a different story. In the days leading up to the incident, those closest to him reportedly noticed changes. According to one acquaintance, Mario had grown withdrawn. He wasn't talking to people. He wasn't making sense when he did, like he was in his own world. Another source claimed he had recently quit his job abruptly, no notice, no explanation. He just walked out. Didn't say a word. Just left. Family members who have chosen not to speak publicly are believed to have raised concerns privately about his mental health. Though no official diagnosis has been released, investigators are actively exploring whether Mario may have been suffering from an untreated psychological disorder, such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or a brief psychotic episode, all conditions that can cause sudden delusions, paranoia, or disorganized behavior. It's also unclear whether substance use played a role. Toxicology tests were ordered following his arrest, but those results have not been made public. What is clear is this: Mario Nikprelaj boarded that plane not as a terrorist or a criminal mastermind, but as someone whose state of mind may have been unstable, unpredictable, and dangerous. Experts in aviation psychology were quick to weigh in. Dr. Emily Ross, a forensic psychologist and former aviation safety consultant, commented in a CBS report. Attempts to open an aircraft door mid-flight are often driven by delusional thinking. Passengers may believe they're in danger, or they confuse the door for an exit in a building. It's rarely rational. In Mario's case, some witnesses reported hearing him mumble phrases like, "I need to get out," and "they're watching me." These statements, while unconfirmed, suggest a state of paranoia. Others noted he didn't lash out violently. He didn't fight or try to hurt anyone, but his focus on the door was obsessive. Like he was convinced he had to open it, one passenger said. Did Mario believe he was escaping something? Did he feel trapped? Or did he simply lose touch with reality mid-flight? Regardless of intent, federal authorities take in-flight disturbances very seriously. The FBI immediately opened an investigation. Mario Nikprelaj was arrested on multiple charges including interference with a flight crew, a federal offense punishable by up to 20 years in prison, attempting to tamper with an aircraft system. Even though he didn't succeed, the attempt itself is enough for prosecution. Endangering the safety of an aircraft, under FAA regulations. At the time of his arrest, he was transported to the Lynn County Jail in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where he remained in federal custody as of July 18, 2025. He was not granted bail pending a mental health evaluation, a move suggesting the court is weighing competency to stand trial as part of its next steps. In the days following the incident, FBI agents visited Mario's Omaha residence, interviewing neighbors and family, reviewing his phone and digital history, and looking for any indicators of terrorist affiliation, none found; violent ideology, none discovered; prior threats or behaviors, none documented. Instead, the emerging profile was one of a young man in mental distress, isolated and possibly untreated. One investigator stated anonymously, "There's no manifesto, no plan, no conspiracy. But something snapped. And when people snap at 30,000 feet, it's a very different kind of crime." The media, eager for headlines, painted Mario as the man who tried to open the door mid-flight. And while technically true, it may not tell the full story. Was Mario a would-be saboteur? A danger to society? Or was he a tragic example of what happens when mental health goes unnoticed and untreated? As of now, the court has ordered a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation. Depending on the findings, Mario could face trial or be found incompetent to proceed, meaning he may be sent to a federal psychiatric facility instead of prison. His case could become a turning point for how aviation incidents involving mental illness are handled in the future. As investigators dig deeper, one thing becomes clear. Mario Nikprelaj wasn't trying to hijack a plane, start a riot, or hurt anyone intentionally. But his behavior, erratic, reckless, and dangerous, almost did just that. Passengers aboard Delta Flight 3612 still recall the terror of that moment. The sound of seatbelts unclicking, the shouts, the struggle. For them, Mario Nikprelaj will always be the man who tried to open the door. But for investigators, he's something more complicated, a puzzle made of psychology, fear, and federal law. In Part 3, we'll take you inside the federal courtroom, explore the charges in detail, and reveal how one terrifying moment midair turned into a legal battle that could define Mario Nikprelaj's future, and possibly the future of aviation safety policies across the U.S. By July 18, 2025, just one day after Delta Flight 3612 was forced to make an emergency landing in Iowa, the name Mario Nikprelaj was etched into the criminal docket of the U.S. federal court system. The man who caused terror at 34,000 feet was no longer just a passenger. He was now a defendant, facing a long list of federal charges with life-altering consequences. But this was not a typical case. No weapons, no clear motive, no manifesto. Just one young man, a failed attempt to open a mid-flight exit door, and 67 frightened people left behind asking one question: why? As Mario Nikprelaj sat silently in a Cedar Rapids holding facility, The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Iowa officially charged him with 3 serious federal offenses: interference with flight crew members and attendants. Under 18 U.S. Code Section 46504, this charge is applied when any individual assaults, threatens, or interferes with crew members in the performance of their duties. Maximum sentence: 20 years in prison. Attempting to tamper with aircraft systems. The attempt to open the emergency exit was treated as an effort to interfere with the aircraft's safe operation. Even though the door couldn't have been opened mid-air due to cabin pressure, the intent is what mattered legally: endangering the safety of an aircraft in flight. A broad charge that gives prosecutors wide discretion in aviation-related crimes. It only takes one reckless act to qualify. Combined, these charges position Mario to face up to 30 years in federal prison, depending on the outcome of the investigation, his mental state, and how the court would rule on his competency to stand trial. On Monday, July 21st, Mario Nikprelaj appeared before a federal magistrate in a closed hearing, citing security and mental health concerns. He was described by reporters and courtroom officials as emotionless, detached, and soft-spoken. Dressed in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles were shackled. Federal Public Defender Carla Jensen represented him. She told the court, "My client is not refusing to cooperate, he simply appears confused and disoriented. We believe mental health evaluations are not only necessary but urgent." The presiding judge agreed, ordering that Mario undergo a full psychiatric evaluation before any decisions about bail, trial scheduling, or plea discussions could proceed. Mario was returned to custody and scheduled for transport to a federal medical center in Missouri for observation. This case triggered a quiet storm in federal aviation circles, not because of what Mario did but why he did it. At the core of the investigation was this critical question: was Mario competent to stand trial, or legally insane at the time of the offense? Here's the difference. Competency to stand trial refers to a defendant's current ability to understand the charges and participate in their defense. Legal insanity, on the other hand, refers to the defendant's mental state at the time of the crime. If Mario was found competent, he'd proceed through trial like any other defendant. But if found legally insane, he could be declared not guilty by reason of insanity, which would send him to a federal psychiatric hospital indefinitely, not prison. Within days of his mental health evaluation order, the court approved 2 expert witnesses: a forensic psychologist appointed by the defense, a forensic psychiatrist appointed by the prosecution. Over a 2-week period, Mario was evaluated for cognitive awareness, emotional regulation, history of psychiatric issues, possible psychotic episodes or delusions, drug or substance influence. Though their findings were sealed by court order, sources close to the case suggested evidence of untreated mental illness was found, possibly schizophrenia or a related psychotic disorder. One official stated off the record, "This wasn't a terrorist act. This was a mental health crisis that happened at 34,000 feet and endangered everyone on board." For the defense, Mario's mental state would become the central pillar of their case. They would not argue that he didn't walk toward the door. They wouldn't deny that passengers had to stop him. Instead, they would argue that Mario was not in control of his actions, that he was suffering from a mental break that rendered him incapable of understanding what he was doing. Meanwhile, the prosecution focused on public safety. Even if he was mentally ill, Mario's actions had still put 67 people in danger. Assistant U.S. Attorney Julia Adams told reporters, "Mental illness does not erase the danger posed by this kind of behavior. Air travel must remain safe, and passengers must be protected, always." This case also reignited questions about aviation screening and support. Should passengers with known psychiatric histories be allowed to fly unaccompanied? Should airlines do more to train crew in mental health recognition? And what support systems failed Mario Nikprelaj long before he stepped onto that plane? No easy answers. but the discussion was growing. As of late July 2025, the court was awaiting the final mental health evaluation report. The next hearing was scheduled for August 15th, where the judge would rule on Mario's competency. If he's ruled competent, a full trial could begin as early as fall 2025. If not, Mario may be committed for long-term psychiatric treatment under federal supervision, with annual reviews determining whether he remains a risk to himself or others. Whatever the outcome, the story of Delta Flight 3612 continues to send shockwaves across the aviation and legal communities. In one moment, the routine became terrifying. In one motion, a door handle became a symbol of chaos. And in one courtroom, a young man's future now hangs in the balance, not just for what he did, but for what he might not have fully understood. This has been the story of Mario Nikprelaj, a name now tied to one of the most disturbing mid-air incidents of 2025. If this story gripped you like it did us, go ahead and hit that like button. It helps push these stories to more curious minds across the US. Got a theory? Question? Or a case you think deserves to be uncovered? Drop it in the comments below. We read every single one. And if you believe the truth should travel farther than silence ever could, share this video with someone, a friend, a follower, or even a stranger. And most importantly, subscribe to this one and only Daily Crime Discoveries for more. Because truth deserves an audience. In every city, every state, and beyond.